Welcome, deep divers. Get ready for quite a journey today. We're looking at a story many of us think we know pretty well.
That's right.
Israel's 40 years in the wilderness, after the big escape from Egypt.
hmm
Now, usually we hear about this time as, well, basically punishment, right? A consequence for not having enough faith, a sort of divine timeout.
It's a common narrative, absolutely.
But the sources we're diving into today, they really challenge that. Radically, they offer a perspective that just turns this whole period upside down.
It really does. It shifts the focus dramatically.
So our mission, our deep dive today is to unpack that, to
Yeah.
see what happens when we look past that surface explanation.
And it is a radical reinterpretation we found in these sources. It suggests these 40 years were, well, much more than just punishment or aimless wandering.
More than just consequences.
Far more. The idea is that this was an incredibly intense time. Rigorous training, deep cultural formation.
Okay.
It was the very beginning of what these sources actually call a holy culture movement.
A holy culture movement. That sounds significant. What does that even mean?
It's a powerful phrase, and it points to this incredibly ambitious, almost audacious mission they were given.
Which was?
To forge a society that was truly unique, exemplary even, something that could potentially change the world.
Yeah.
Not just a nation for itself.
Wow. Okay, holy culture movement. That phrase alone shifts things for me. Away from just, being punished towards purpose.
Exactly. Purpose.
But when you say holy culture, what are we talking about practically? Is it just about religion? New laws?
That's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
The sources argue this wasn't just about, say, specific rituals or beliefs alone. It was about a fundamentally different way of living
Living how?
and organizing society. Imagine trying to build something completely opposite to the big empires around them. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon.
Right, which were all about top-down power hierarchies.
Precisely. Where power was everything, where ordinary people didn't count for much,
Yeah.
where huge gaps between rich and poor were just normal. This holy culture was envisioned as, well, radically equal. Communal responsibility, a whole new idea of justice,
Okay.
meant to be lived out, tangibly in everyday life, not just an idea.
That is breathtaking, really, especially back then.
Absolutely. For that historical period, it's stunningly ambitious.
This is a great starting point. I'm genuinely excited to unpack this because, it doesn't just change how we see ancient history, does it?
No, it potentially offers insights for today, too.
Right. Maybe even for how we think about building better, more just societies now. So, okay, let's first sketch out the standard timeline, the one most of us know, just so we see what's being challenged here.
Good idea. Set the stage.
So the familiar story arc, it starts obviously with the Exodus, the escape from Egypt, huge event.
Monumental.
Then pretty quickly, you get the Sinai Covenant. Scholars usually put that around, 1500 BCE, give or take?
That's the traditional dating, yeah.
Yeah.
Places them in the late Bronze Age, surrounded by these major powers. There's always debate, but that's the ballpark.
Okay. Then come the 40 years in the wilderness. That's our focus. Which leads eventually to settling in Canaan, the monarchy, King David, Solomon, all that. Then the kingdom splits, it gets destroyed, people are exiled, they come back.
A long and often tragic one.
Right, ultimately leading to Roman control and, in many views, the sort of breaking of that original covenant.
And within that big picture, those 40 years, they've always been a sticking point, often seen in a pretty negative light.
Yeah.
The dominant idea, the one you probably learned maybe from Sunday school or just general knowledge, especially from the book of Numbers,
Right.
is that this was mainly God's punishment.
For messing up.
For messing up, exactly. For their failures, their lack of faith, especially after the spies came back from Canaan with that bad report.
The spies incident, yeah.
That generation, the story goes, wasn't allowed into the promised land. They died in the wilderness because they disobeyed. It seems pretty clear-cut, right? Cause and effect.
It does feel like the most straightforward reading, based on the stories of them complaining and rebelling all the time.
It does.
So it's a big claim to say that interpretation might be, missing the point, or at least not the whole point.
It is a bold claim.
What's the core critique from our sources against just seeing it as punishment?
The sources are pretty strong on this. They argue that focusing only on punishment risks making God seem, overly strict, severe even.
Like just reacting.
Yeah, like reducing God's actions to just simple, almost knee-jerk retribution. One source even suggests that this narrow view could accidentally, misrepresent God, could even be seen as blaspheming God and the deeper meaning of Scripture.
Wow, blaspheming. That's strong language.
It is. It suggests we might be missing something much deeper, much more layered, behind those 40 years, a bigger divine purpose.
Okay, that definitely makes you pause and think. So if it wasn't just punishment, what was it fundamentally about, according to this other view?
This is where it gets really interesting. The alternative perspective is that the wilderness was essentially about intensive training and education.
Training and education.
Yes. Deliberate preparation. Not just fixing a mistake, but equipping them for something much, much bigger.
Bigger than just getting their own land.
Much bigger. The sources emphasize that Israel's calling wasn't just to be saved for themselves, kick back and enjoy the promised land. No, the idea was they were destined to become a model community, like a blueprint for the entire world.
A model community for the world? That sounds incredibly ambitious for a group of newly freed slaves.
Audacious is the word the source uses, and it required this profound transformation root and branch, something punishment alone couldn't achieve.
A model community for the world. How would that even work? How could they be a model? What would others see?
Well, that required a completely new way of thinking, of living. The sources use this great analogy. Think of a military academy.
Okay, like West Point or Sandhurst.
Exactly. When you need to train elite officers, future leaders, people who will protect the nation.
Yeah.
No, you don't do it downtown.
No, you take them somewhere separate, focused.
Right. They're often secluded, isolated from distractions, from outside influences. They go through intense, focused training in a controlled environment to instill discipline, new values, a shared identity.
Okay, I see the parallel.
The wilderness, then, served a very similar function for the Israelites. It was like specifically chosen to isolate them from the dominant cultures around them, especially Egypt, which they just left, with its powerful gods and social structures, all the polytheism, the hierarchy.
So a controlled environment.
Yes, demanding for sure, but also one where they had to learn total reliance on God to forge new identity, a different way of life, away from those old patterns.
That comparison really hits home, but 40 years? I mean, that's like 10 times longer than most military academies, isn't it?
It's an incredibly long time.
That length itself seems significant. It suggests this wasn't just basic training, this was something else.
Exactly. An exceptionally rigorous, thorough, incubating period. It wasn't wasted time, not aimless wandering. It points to a very clear, purposeful objective. A long-term investment in whatever this mission was.
Which makes you wonder, what was the curriculum? What were they actually learning for 40 years that was so hard it took that long? And it also brings us back to that tricky question. Okay, if it wasn't just punishment, why did that whole first generation, the ones who actually walked out of Egypt, die in the wilderness?
Right.
Only the next generation got to go into Canaan. That fact seems to really support the punishment idea, doesn't it?
It does, on the surface. And the sources tackle this directly. They argue that blaming their deaths only on the spies incident, well, it oversimplifies things.
How so?
It potentially flattens God's character, maybe misses the bigger picture in the Bible. It suggests there was a more fundamental issue going on, something beyond just that one failure, crucial as it was.
And that fundamental issue was?
They call it a profound cultural problem.
A cultural problem, not just individual sins, but something deeper, more collective.
Exactly. Think about that Exodus generation. Yes, they were slaves, but their families had lived for hundreds of years inside the Egyptian empire.
Immersed in it.
Totally immersed. For generations, their whole way of seeing the world, their values, their habits, how they understood power, justice, community, even the gods, it was all deeply shaped by Egypt.
Even as slaves.
Even as slaves. You absorb the air you breathe, culturally speaking. The pharaoh as a god, the strict hierarchy, the magic, the way society worked, it sinks in.
Right.
But God's plan, according to these sources, was to set up something totally new in Israel, this holy culture we mentioned.
Yeah.
Which was meant to be radically different, almost the opposite of Egypt.
Okay.
So that existing cultural programming, that Egyptian way of thinking, ingrained in the Exodus generation, was a massive barrier, maybe an impossible one to fully overcome for them.
So it wasn't just about their actions in the moment, the complaining or rebelling.
Though those happened, clearly.
Right. But it was more about their fundamental makeup, what they were culturally, because of Egypt.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
The source uses a really helpful analogy here, comparing it to learning a language.
Oh, yeah. How does that work?
Think about trying to learn a completely new language perfectly as an adult, especially one very different from your own.
It's hard, really hard. You always have an accent, usually.
Exactly. Your brain, your tongue, your whole linguistic framework is already set. You can learn it, function in it, but sounding like a native. Almost impossible for most people.
But kids.
But kids pick it up like sponges,
Yeah.
right? Naturally, effortlessly, perfectly, no accent. The source suggests it was similar culturally. That first generation, already adults steeped in the language of Egyptian culture, would find it incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to fully switch to this radically new cultural language God was introducing.
Their cultural accent was too strong.
You could put it that way. It would be a constant fight against ingrained habits, perspectives, assumptions. It wasn't just about choosing not to sin. It was about the immense difficulty of a complete cultural reprogramming in midlife.
That makes a lot of sense. Thinking beyond language. What specific parts of Egyptian culture would have been so hardwired? Like their ideas about power, maybe, or justice?
Great question. I mean, think about Pharaoh's absolute power. He was considered a god on earth. That instills a certain view of authority, right?
Total submission, basically.
Right. And the rigid social pyramid, priests, nobles, scribes, soldiers, farmers, slaves, everyone knew their place, and it wasn't equal. Justice often favored the powerful.
Okay.
Religion involved a huge pantheon, complex rituals, often focused on the afterlife or appeasing gods who seemed distant or demanding. Property was often controlled by the state or temples. Magic was everywhere.
So inequality, servitude, divine rulers, magic.
It was a whole worldview. And God's vision for Israel, as we'll get into, was the polar opposite. Equality, a single, accessible God, justice for the vulnerable, decentralized power.
Trying to unlearn the Egyptian way. Yeah, I can see how that would be like trying to rewrite your brain's operating system as an adult. A massive clash of values.
A fundamental conflict, yes.
Which leads us to maybe the most mind-bending insight from the sources about why that generation died out.
Yes, this is where it gets really radical.
Yeah.
The sources propose something quite startling.
What is it?
That the death of that first generation wasn't only a consequence of sin, it could also be seen, and this is challenging, as a holy sacrifice.
A holy sacrifice, their deaths.
Yes, in the sense that their passing, their departure from the stage, created the necessary space. It was almost like a clearing of the ground.
Space for what?
For the next generation, the wilderness generation, those born and raised outside Egypt, free from that deep cultural imprinting. They needed a clean slate, culturally speaking, to truly cultivate and embody this new holy culture without the constant pull, the friction of the old ways represented by their parents.
So their passing made room for the new culture to actually take root. That's the perspective offered. It allowed the new culture to flourish without being constantly overshadowed or compromised by the deeply ingrained Egyptian framework of the previous generation.
Wow. Yeah, just let that sink in for a second. That reframes everything. It doesn't make their failure disappear, but it gives their experience, even their deaths, a kind of profound sacrificial purpose within the bigger plan.
Exactly. It doesn't excuse their complaints or rebellions. The Bible is clear about those. They definitely struggled.
Right.
But the source encourages seeing their whole wilderness time, including its tragic end for them, within this larger purposeful context, preparing the way, making the ultimate sacrifice, perhaps unknowingly, for the future.
It's a lot to chew on. Okay, so this holy culture was so important, so central, it required this massive undertaking. Let's get to the heart of it. What is this holy culture? We hear holy, and, we often think religious purity, maybe being morally perfect as an individual, so like separate from the world, maybe. Is that it?
Yeah.
That's the common association for sure.
Yeah.
But this is another point where the sources push us to think differently. A core insight is this. When the Bible, particularly God, says, "Be holy, for I am holy."
Yeah.
It's not just about an abstract spiritual state or individual goodness separate from everyone else. The argument is that it's a specific and social concept.
Social? How so?
Meaning it has direct, real-world implications for how society is built, how people treat each other, what makes a community truly thrive according to God's vision. It's not just internal belief, it's external collective action.
A specific and social concept of holiness. Okay, that's a big shift right there. So if it's social, what does it look like? What kind of society were they supposed to build?
The sources paint a picture that is, frankly, revolutionary. The holiness God wanted meant creating a society where everyone is respected equally without discrimination and all live happily and prosperously together.
Equally, without discrimination. Happily and prosperously together.
Yes. A society deliberately designed to eliminate distinctions of status, social rank, or huge gaps between rich and poor, an intentionally egalitarian community.
Where everyone's inherent value is recognized, no matter who they are.
Exactly. Regardless of birth, wealth, position, that was the blueprint.
That sounds almost impossibly idealistic, especially back then. How could they even imagine that, let alone try to build it?
That's precisely the point. The sources stress how radical it was. Think about the world they were in. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, all built on rigid pyramids. Tiny elite at the top, masses at the bottom.
Right. Inequality was just the way things were.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this vision for Israel was utterly groundbreaking, a concept you rarely saw even centuries later, let alone back then.
And it wasn't just a nice idea.
No, the sources emphasize it was a divine command. Implement this. Create a social order that actively pushed back against the oppression and inequality common everywhere else.
A society designed to protect the vulnerable, ensure basic needs, give everyone dignity.
Yes, challenging every assumption about power, wealth, and human worth.
So it wasn't enough to just talk about it. They had to live it.
Precisely. Their mission was to actually create and live out this egalitarian holy community. Make it real, tangible, a model for the world to see.
This holy culture movement thing.
Yes, it demanded they prove it with their lives. A living demonstration, a social experiment, not just theology. They had to embody it.
Okay, so their society itself was meant to be the message.
That's the idea. Their laws, their economy, their daily interactions, all meant to be a testament to this different way. And this even changed how they thought about leadership.
Oh, how was leadership different? It wasn't like Pharaoh, I assume.
Definitely not. It was completely distinct from the models of domination and conquest seen everywhere else.
So what was it then?
In this holy culture, leadership wasn't about ruling over people. It was about serving them.
Servant leadership. We hear that term sometimes today.
Right. And the sources point out this principle, which Jesus later exemplified so powerfully, was right there at the foundation, a core value.
So leaders were meant to enable others.
Exactly. Turn the pyramid upside down. Leaders are there to lift everyone else up, help the whole community flourish, not just accumulate power or wealth for themselves.
Prioritizing the vulnerable, ensuring justice, modeling integrity.
That was the ideal, a stark contrast to the kings and emperors around them.
Okay, this is fascinating. A society built on equality and service. But again, how do you actually teach that? How do you instill this radical new way of thinking and living in a whole generation, especially one coming out of Egyptian slavery over 40 years?
Right. You need a curriculum, right? Teaching tools.
Exactly. What was the textbook for this wilderness academy?
The sources are very specific here. They point to two main things as the primary textbook and audiovisual aids.
Okay.
The Tabernacle, Sahamak, and the sacrifices, Jeza.
A tabernacle and the sacrifices. We usually think of those as purely religious things, right? Place of worship, rituals.
And they were that, of course. But the argument is they were designed to be much more. They were loaded with educational meaning, intentionally crafted to teach and reinforce the core principles of this holy culture. Equality, humility, service.
They were object lessons.
Constantly reinforcing the vision, yes.
Okay, let's break that down. The tabernacle first. I usually picture it as, a tent, temple, portable church for nomads.
That's the basic image, sure. But seeing it as an educational tool, wow. Its design speaks volumes, especially compared to what they knew in Egypt.
How so? Like the size?
Exactly. Consider the size. The absolute holiest part, the Holy of Holies, just on so, was tiny. Really small, about 5 by 5 meters.
That is small compared to Egyptian temples.
Which are massive. Think Karnak, Luxor. Huge, ornate, built on an immense scale. Why? To show the pharaoh's power, his wealth, his divinity. To overwhelm you, make you feel small.
Create distance, maybe fear.
Right. But the tabernacle's small, intimate scale. It's in the opposite message. Humility, accessibility, relationship. God wasn't some distant, terrifying emperor needing a palace.
But someone dwelling right there among them.
In a humble space, approachable, mirroring their own tents maybe, direct connection.
That's a powerful contrast. Okay, size matters. What about the materials? Were they fancy? Gold and jewels.
That's another key point. You'd expect gold, lapis, alabaster, like in Pharaoh's tomb, right? For a god's house.
Yeah, the best stuff.
But no, the fabrics, described as recycled fabric. Threads taken from people's own contributions, respun.
Recycled series.
Seriously. And the wood for the poles, the ark, not imported, expensive Lebanon cedar, the status symbol wood.
No, what?
Acacia wood. Common, twisted, knotty trees found right there in the wilderness. humble, local stuff.
Wow. So not impressive materials at all.
Not in the worldly sense, but profoundly symbolic. It showed God valued equality, humility, resourcefulness. The ordinary, the shared contribution, mattered more than fancy displays of wealth.
Sacredness wasn't about expense, but about heart and community.
Exactly. The value was in the shared effort, the meaning, not the market price. A lesson in itself.
Okay, so size, materials, both teaching, humility, equality. This is really changing how I see the tabernacle. Now, what about that weird rule about the altar, no cut stones? That always seemed oddly specific.
Oh, yes. If you make an altar of stones for me, do not build it of hewn stones, for if you use a tool on it, you will defile it.
Right. What's that about? Why would using a tool defile it?
The sources offer a profound social interpretation. Think about what it takes to cut stones perfectly smooth and square back then.
A lot of skill, specialized tools, hard labor,
Yeah.
expensive.
Exactly. It required skill, labor, resources. Commissioning beautifully cut stone structures was a major display of power and wealth. It inherently created or highlighted class distinctions, those who could command such work versus those who did the work or couldn't afford it. So God declaring that practice unholy, bujangato, was essentially saying, actions that create or flaunt social hierarchy, that exploit labor for vanity or status, that is unholy.
Whoa. So unholiness here is directly tied to social injustice, to inequality.
That's the argument. It's not just about ritual purity. It's fundamentally about social ethics. Building something impressive at the cost of equality,
Right.
or by showing off status that was deemed offensive to God's vision.
That is a revelation. I never saw that connection before. It redefines sacred away from just aesthetics towards social impact.
Right. It's not about perfect looks, but about the human values embodied and how it's made.
So if they couldn't use cut stones, how did they build the altar? And what did that teach?
It had to be made of natural, uncut field stones, just as they found them, or even just mounded earth. Simple, humble,
Okay. Yeah.
and crucially, it had to be low. The command also mentioned not having steps leading up to it to avoid exposure. This implied it should be maybe ankle height.
Ankle height, so really low.
Yeah, really low. No big platform, no imposing structure making the priests seem higher than the people. Anyone could approach it easily, like a simple family hearth.
Accessible, egalitarian, no barriers.
Exactly. Deliberately avoiding anything that screamed status or sacred distance. It was everyone's space, reinforcing that all are equal before God.
Incredible. So the entire tabernacle, down to the altar height, was a constant lesson in equality, humility, accessibility, a curriculum built right into their central structure.
A silent sermon in design, constantly reinforcing the holy culture.
But it wasn't just about buildings, it was about action, interaction. So the sacrifices, the core religious practice. Did they also carry these radical social lessons beyond just atonement for sin?
Oh, absolutely. The sources argue that while animal sacrifice was common in the ancient world, the way Israel did it, the spirit behind it, was totally different, loaded with social and ethical meaning.
How so? What was different?
Well, first think about what was actually offered to God versus what happened to the rest. In many pagan systems, the god demanded the best bits, or maybe the whole animal was burned up. But here, the parts actually burned on the altar for God were mainly the fat portions, certain internal organs.
Things people didn't usually eat anyway, or the less desirable parts.
Often, yes. It was symbolic, a token acknowledging God's sovereignty, not giving up the main food value.
Okay, that's interesting. So if God got the symbolic bits, what happened to the actual meat, the good parts?
This is the revolutionary part. The best cuts, the prime edible meat, were given back to the person, the family, who brought the offering.
Giving back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even more, God specifically commanded them to eat and rejoice before me.
Eat and rejoice.
Yeah. So the sacrifice wasn't some grim duty or fearful appeasement. It transformed into a joyous communal feast.
A shared meal.
Exactly. A powerful moment for relationship restoration. Not just vertically, between the person and God, but horizontally within the community. Families would gather, share this food, celebrate together. It fostered reconciliation, strengthened bonds. It was about connection.
So less about paying a debt to God, more about celebrating relationship with God and each other.
That's the feeling.
Yeah.
And the source uses that really vivid mother's analogy to capture God's generosity here.
Right. Tell us that one.
It paints this picture of a loving mother preparing a fish. Does she keep the best part for herself?
No, usually gives it to her kids.
Right. She gives the best, fleshiest parts to her children. And maybe she just eats the head or the tail herself. God is portrayed like that benevolent mother.
Not a demanding king, but a generous parent.
Exactly. Taking only the symbolic minimum, the fat, the organs, and joyfully sharing the best, the actual nourishment, with his children, Israel. It shows a God who delights in their happiness, who provides generously, seeks joyful connection, not harsh tribute.
That's a beautiful image, a complete contrast to the often scary, demanding gods of their neighbors.
A stark contrast.
It turns sacrifice from maybe a burden into a gift, a celebration. But you said there was an even deeper point to this, beyond just being grateful for the food and enjoying community.
Yes. There's a powerful, active mandate embedded in this whole process.
Okay.
The sources stress it wasn't just about receiving and saying thanks. The implicit command was, look how I've generously shared with you, served you. Now you must go and do the same.
Do the same for others.
Exactly. Go out and share your best with others. Serve others in the world, especially, the sources emphasize, the powerless, the poor, the marginalized, the stranger.
Wow. So the act of worship itself contained instructions for social action?
Intrinsically linked. The sacrifice, the communion with God, wasn't complete until it flowed outward into practical, neighborly love and service.
It was the prototype, the fuel, for a life serving both God and humanity.
The spiritual and the social were inseparable. Worship led directly to ethics. That's the core idea. It was all meant to build this just, caring, equitable society, the holy culture.
Well, deep divers, what a journey this has been today. These sources we've explored, they've really turned my understanding of those 40 wilderness years completely on its head.
It's definitely a paradigm shift.
The whole idea of it being intensive training for a holy culture, one built on radical equality, on service instead of just punishment. It's groundbreaking, really. It changes the whole feel of that foundational story.
It does. And for me, some moments really stood out. That reinterpretation of the first generation's death as a holy sacrifice, that's profound.
Yeah.
And then seeing the deep social lessons hidden in plain sight. In the Tabernacle's small size, the recycled fabrics, the humble wood, that rule against cut stones fighting hierarchy.
Right, and the sacrifices being communal feasts that mandate sharing with the needy.
Exactly. These weren't just random details. Our sources showed they were deliberate, powerful lessons communicating these revolutionary values, humility, equality, service, right at the heart of everything.
It's also tightly woven together, isn't it? Every piece, from the architecture to the rituals, served this educational purpose in the Wilderness Academy.
Seems so.
Which leads to the big question, I guess. What was the ultimate point? What was the grand aim of this whole massive holy culture movement? Why go to all this effort?
The sources bring it together really compellingly. They argue the original biblical vision for sort of saving the world wasn't about forcing belief on people, not aggressive conversion or conquest.
No, then what?
It was about demonstrating a better way to live.
Showing, not telling.
Exactly. Creating this community, Israel, where equality wasn't just a theory, where service mattered more than status, where justice flowed, where huge wealth gaps didn't exist ideally.
A living example.
Yes. This holy culture movement aimed to proudly showcase God's values through lived reality, through their social fabric, their laws, their daily lives. The idea was this would be so compelling, so attractive,
That others would want it too.
that it would inspire others, lead to transformation by attraction, not force. A model society proving God's way leads to true human flourishing for everyone.
That's a powerful vision, a testament through living. Okay, as we wrap up, I'm left with a final thought, a question maybe, for you, our listener, to think about. Our sources connect a lot of this to Moses' leadership, under God's guidance, of course. But just imagine the sheer wisdom, the incredible sustained effort, the collective struggle involved.
Yeah.
To not just think up such a radical social and cultural program, but to actually try and implement it and maintain it for 40 years in the desert and then pass it on successfully. It's staggering.
It really is.
So the question is, what inspiration, what insights can this ancient, incredibly radical ideal of an egalitarian community and the practical, even architectural ways they tried to build it in the wilderness, what can that offer us today? As we try to build our own more just, more equitable societies, is there a blueprint hidden there we've maybe overlooked, something to ponder?